Hello there, it's Paul here and welcome on everyone. Just grabbed this piece of wood off of my shelf, which was probably what I bought from the local sawmill probably a year or two ago, and the highest moisture reading I can get on the outside is about 11% on one edge, and obviously that can be totally different when I turn it down inside, so it's really a case of seeing what I've got as I go along. I've no idea what I'm going to make out of this. It does, by the looks of it, has some interesting pattern on here. Now, this just could be water stain or something like that, but the look of this grain on the edge here is really, really nice. I've got a couple of small cracks there. Hopefully they don't go in too deep. This is just on the corner here, so that hopefully will just turn out when I true it up. This side looks fairly plain. I mean, I suspect that could be just a darker piece of wood through there. It just looks like it's on the outside edge. And that almost looks like it's probably a little bit punky there as well. So again, I'll have to see. Yeah, have to just see what this is like as I turn it along. So I'm going to true this up first of all, just with a rough and gouge, and just see what we've got when we get this down to true. Then I can just take another moisture reading and decide where I'm going to go from there. So I've got to say that looks really nice actually. Barely getting a reading, 7, 8, 9%, 5, 6. So I'd say that is very dry. Those cracks have gone from here. So I'm just going to straighten off this end here and put a tenant on there. So I've got this roughly trued up, and I don't know how well this is shown on the camera because it might just be too bright, but it's got some really, really nice character in this wood. I'm going to take a small section of this bottom here. I will put a tenon on this end first of all, because then at least once this end is parted off, I'll at least have a tenon to put it in the jaws for when I want to reuse it for something else. But this bottom bit, what I want to do is I'm going to have probably the base somewhere like that. I'm going to have a fairly shallow box, probably like that, and then because I then need to allow for things like the tenon and stuff, and then I will then just going to increase this a little bit bigger so it looks a little bit bigger for what will be the lid, but I've got to take out of this probably the tenon, and I will probably part off on that side of the line as well. So therefore I need to then part this off somewhere around here. I'm not going to follow the rule of thirds here. I want these two sections probably fairly similar in size. Now I've sanded this through the grits from 80 right the way through 600, and it's got rid of all the tear out. You can just about feel a minute little bit down there, but it's not very visible. I also, with the 600 grit paper, just took it on the outside of this tenon to take the roughness of it off, and this does still fit on there nicely. It's even with a little gap there, it holds on, but it just needs a little bit of a push on. And hopefully when we get the sanding sealer on and a little bit of wax on, or a bit of shellac on there, it will just stiffen it up a little bit more, but it's certainly acceptable like that, where it's not going to fall off. So I'm just using my ordinary sanding sealer here. And that looks really nice. This has had 2 coats of sanding sealer, and I've just denibbed it with the 600 grit paper again. I've got my shellac mix here, and I did a video not so long ago on manually applying shellac to as a finish rather than with the lathe spinning, a few weeks before this video. So please do, if you want to see more details about this, everything I'm doing here, go and see that video. But the idea is to just give the piece a coat of shellac, a thin coat like this, let that dry, and then top it up with another coat. I've just put the 3rd coat on there. If you'd watched my video on doing the shellac finish, I did say on there, after I'd given it about 8 coats, I used the wet and dry paper to sand it back, which is a 1200 grit paper. And as somebody rightfully commented, you do get like this white powder everywhere, which is then why I'd always then go over 1 further coat. Now the suggestion there was that water is the reason why you get that white powder, and they did suggest using Web to sand it back when you're finished. I've gone out and bought a set of Web cloths. These are actually from Chestnut Products. I ordered them online and got them delivered. They work out at £1.50 per sheet, so they're not expensive. And the good thing about these compared to like sandpaper is that you just carry on using and using and using them until they disintegrate. They still have the same effect as they go through. These are only as a rough guide from the manufacturer. The green is supposed to be the equivalent of roughly like 400 grit paper. The red, 600. The orange or gold, whichever you want to call it, 1000 grit. And the white is effectively not supposed to have any equivalent to grit, so it's more of like a polisher. You can feel some roughness in there, so it's going to be up in the extremes of probably several thousand on the grit. And the idea is that rather than using like the wet and dry paper, you use a bit of Web over the shellac finish to gently polish them up. The shellac on this is now fully cured, and it doesn't take too long. It's got quite a nice finish. It's certainly got a nice gloss to it, but it is slightly pitted, and you can feel that it's not as smooth as obviously what it has been. So I'm going to start off with the white Web, which should effectively have 0 abrasion to it. So I'm just going to initially go over it this way rather than spin the lathe up, and I've got to say, just doing that has made quite a difference already in the texture on there. So because this is nice and flexible, it's not too stiff, I'm just going to put the lathe up on a slower speed because I just want to go around this edge a bit as well, because I can now see it's a little bit rough with the tear out and where it's had the moisture go on it. So I've just done that gently on there, not too much pressure. And I've got to say, that's come out really quite nice. That's nice and smooth. Certainly the edge here isn't because of the tear out, but there's not really a lot I can do about that one. But the finish on there I'm really pleased with, and hopefully if we try and put this back together again, we've got a slightly tighter fit, which obviously over time will wear as the shellac on here wears a bit, but for now It's giving an absolutely brilliant fit on there, and you do get that pop now with the suction. So it's got a really nice suction fit on it. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put the base back into the lathe here. I'm just going to try and get rid of the tear out in here. I have gone for a slightly curved bottom on here rather than the straight edge down, and just tidied up the inside there, get it sanded up with the sanding sealer and get a coat of shellac on so that we're at the same position as the lid on the base here. Now at the bottom here I've finished off the same as the top, and here's a classic example of where things can go wrong with a box. I gently sanded the inside of the tenon on this with the 600 paper just to take off the roughness a bit. That meant that all of a sudden I lost all the fitting there and the lid fitted rather loosely, so I had to then recut the whole tenon again, and I've not got it as tight as I would like, so it's only just literally a push fit on. And I mean, the lid would fall off if you tipped it over, but hopefully I can build that up a little bit later on with some shellac. Now, because I've had to take the tenon down, I've lost some of my height on the side here, but it's actually worked out quite well because I know the inside of the lid from where the join is here and the inside of the bottom are both actually about the same size. Now what I want to do next is do a little bit of shaping on the outside here, and then that way I can then tape it up to hold the lid in place to then shape the top. Now I've just sanded the top down here through the grits to 600, but I've decided I want to do a little bit more on this, and I'm going to use the Dremel to do a bit of shaping. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to first of all mark off the points of where the jaws all are on here. So that's where jaw 1 is, jaw 4, jaw 3 and jaw 2. Yep, so I want more than that, so I'm now going to go for where the jaws meet. So this is one way of doing it if you haven't got an indexing system. So I've now got 8 points equally all round the side there, and I'm going to just take out a notch on here with the Dremel to take a shape out on the sides there. So I should just get that all sanded up properly now. I've sanded this through the grits up to 600, and I've just wedged a piece of kitchen roll between the pieces to keep it together for while I was sanding. And I've also just put a small parting area in there for where the base is going to be. So I'm just going to go through the usual process of sanding sealer and then the shellac finish again, and just so you can see what this is going to come up like with the sanding sealer. And I'll just let that dry off and knock it back with a 600, give it another coat, and then put the shellac finish on before I then finally part it off. It was a couple of weekends ago that I finished this box. I did post a picture on social media of the wood, and people come back to me saying they thought it was cherry, so I will call this a cherry box. Now, when I made this, I was having a bit of a bad weekend making boxes. Now there's another video which will probably be either just before this one or just after this one, which will just show another box where I've just used some epoxy to help overcome some holes and also some tear out issues that I'd had, and I had issues with that box as well. My main problem was that I was just touching either the mortise or the tenon slightly too much with a bit of sandpaper, and I've lost that perfect fit. So it still sits in there nicely. It's not really wobbling, but if you turn it upside down, there's no holding there whatsoever. Now, overall I wasn't overly impressed with the shape. I suppose it resembles, looking a bit like a rook out of a chess set, which I don't mind so much. But these grooves that I've done with the Dremel, they're sort of halfway between. They either need to be a lot deeper, a lot more sweeping, or they need to be a bit more subtle. And the shellac finish on there, the outside here, I'm quite reasonably happy with. The insides has come up really, really nice. It's nice and smooth. The top is still a little bit rough, so I wasn't overly impressed with that. Now, because of that, I went off and off camera I grabbed another piece of the cherry and I produced this one. And as we can see, I'm holding the lid and it's got a nice top fit, so it's got that suction fit that I want. First of all, the grooves I have done a lot smaller, and I think hopefully you'll see on there that I think it suits it a lot better. Again, I think deeper sweeping grooves which join at points might also look really, really nice. The grain on this still lines up reasonably, but the finish, I've got to say, on this is so much better. I've used shellac on this again as before, just wiping it on, and built up several coats. And again, I used the Niweb to basically take it back. I had to use, I think, the gold one first of all, which is equivalent of about 1,000 grit to rub it back, and then use the white to polish it, and then give it a final coat. And again a bit of a buff on there as well. So that's only shellac on there. The top, I've got a little bit of tear out on there, so that's where probably the more coarseness is. These grooves, I've spent more time sanding them down and treating them to get that smoother finish and finish the bottom off a lot nicer, but the inside again is really, really nice. So this is not really the norm. It's like a 50-50 split with the box, roughly equal size for the lid and the base, which I quite like. So you don't have to do that rule of thirds. Also, the inside, the lid is just normally curved like you would have on a lid, but I've also curved the bottom as well. It's not an overall sweeping curve like the lid. It's more of a flatter curve, so that I bring up the corners of the box rather than having a straight down side edge. but hopefully you can see on there I am really pleased the way this one has come out. And I think my main issue with this was, one, lack of practice, and two, just rushing it too much. This one I've completed, as I say, over the last couple of weeks. Literally just finished it off today, and I been really working in the shed here on a couple of pallet projects. Thanks a lot for watching.